Hello, and welcome back to the Safety Brief, the show where we cut through the noise and talk about what really matters in cybersecurity today. I'm Elizabeth, and today we're going deep inside the stack, your cybersecurity stack, that is. If you did attend yesterday's webinar where we dug deep into the 21 block stack, you could say that this is kind of a sequel to that episode or webinar. So if you didn't get a chance to check that out, feel free to go onto either one of our social pages or in the comments here. I will drop the registration link for that as well. And feel free to dig deep into this stack. As you are probably aware of, your stack is only as strong as its weakest link. So today we'll unpack the essential tools and strategies that make a defense truly resilient, from endpoint security to email protection, and why a proactive prevention first approach will always beat reactive firefighting. All right, so we have Mike here today with us, and hopefully Matt will be joining us here shortly. But to go ahead and get us started um, with the big question here, what makes the cybersecurity stack effective rather than just expensive?
Yeah, this is a good question. So, essentially, when you look at in business, there's a term called ROI, right? Return on investment. And
Mhm.
so, what I think a lot of people struggle with is they merely look at the cost of tools they subscribe to as a means to attaining whatever cyber resilience or confidence around cybersecurity posture. But what I think a lot of people don't factor into that equation, which is an important variable, is the time, engineering time, senior engineer time, whatever tier of time it is. If you're an owner, you're an operator, and deploying all this, then your time's the most valuable because it's spent doing that when you could be doing other things like grow your business. And so ultimately, I think what comes down to effectiveness is good reporting. Like, do I have confidence not just that the tool is performing as advertised, but do I have a way to report this back to whether it's the stakeholders in the boardroom or my end clients that I serve, really whatever it is. But a lot of people look at cybersecurity as a cost, as a line of cost, right? There's really no ROI, and so the difficulty as far as perceiving that is there's two real things to factor in. Number one, you have to factor in what is the cost of downtime. What does it cost if we endure some form of breach, some form of intrusion? What's the mean time to detection and remediation on that? And then factor in how long are we down for, or how long are we quarantining certain critical assets for? And so, really, to stay honed in on the question, there's a lot we can unpack here, but effectiveness, I think, is measured by not just the performance of it, but really two key pieces: the end user experience, right? So I need to make sure that end users can continue their work and continue their productivity uninhibited by these tools. And then the second component really is obvious: it's stopping bad guys, right? And having a proven report or measure of value to articulate that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. I think another thing is too is we see a lot of MSPs or businesses chase every new shiny tool on the market. Anything that spends the big bucks to make it on all the advertisement, and before you know it, they've got a lot of bloat or a lot of bloated tech rather than a cohesive stack. So how do you decide what belongs in a prevention first stack to begin with? How do you kind of push away all the bloat that we
Right.
see?
Yeah. It's a good question because, we have the dilemma we have in the cybersecurity industry today is not a lack of options or tools. And that's what it was many years ago. Now we kind of have this food court dilemma where everything in the food court looks good, sounds good, smells good, right? Like you walk in and you're just overwhelmed by options. And so ultimately, what it comes down to is if you're building a preemptive based left of boom stack, you need to be able to identify really where are your gaps in visibility, and that applies to email, logins, log out events specific to Cloud SaaS and Office 365. You need to be able to have complete visibility to the network, which we unpacked a lot on yesterday's webinar. And then ultimately, really, really good tip of the spear defense. So, our users' workstations, tablets, servers, whatever those assets are in your environment, are they secured with, sub 20 millisecond response time prevention? And I would say if you layer those three things in, that's certainly a good place to start. But also, in a prevention framework, you're going to look at things like end user awareness training, good acceptable use policy, so that your users are educated on, hey, these are the ground rules, these are the left and right lateral limits of what is acceptable use and unacceptable use. And so it's a lot that goes into that. But I would say, do not go out and oversubscribe yourself. In the same way, to kind of paint a picture, in the same way that we probably have 3 or 4 streaming services and we really only use one most of the time, a lot of IT teams today are oversubscribed. They have more tools than they can really manage. They have more tools than they really know where the clear beginnings and ends are of the scope of those tools. And it's a dilemma. It's a dilemma to solve from a cost perspective. It's a dilemma to solve from a assuredness in security posture perspective, because there could be this illusion that, oh, I got 5 vendors in the room, I should be good. And again, there are a lot of good vendors out there. Like I said, our dilemma of today is options, multitude of options. But don't be fooled that, you know, some could be very well doing the same thing.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up the fact that some people over build their stack, right? But another thing that we've also seen is individuals thinking that one solution is a fix-all, right? They get one solution and they think that they're good, whether it's firewall or email or endpoint. They forget to think about every single aspect. And it's a hill that I believe that we will die on, is that no single solution can stop every threat. And not really a hill to die on because it's a fact, right? So can you explain further why layering tools is more effective than relying on a single solution?
Yeah, I mean, layering it's pretty self-explanatory here. It's not any rocket science kind of concept, but I think it's related to the previous point that we made, that layering is important, yes, but you need to be really, really savvy to what exactly are you layering, right? Because, like, hey, a really baked cake is good, but nobody wants cake, right? Without any frosting. Right? So it's
Yeah.
like, too much of any good thing could be bad. And you know what? Maybe some people out there just like the cake and don't like the frosting. My kids like the frosting and not the cake. So it's inverse for them. And so, but I would say, again, layering is important. And I think a lot of people have, kind of hit the gong in the industry and sounded the alarm of, defense in depth is required. I think that's a
Yeah.
universally accepted concept and precept at this point. But again, the dilemma being is that you can over, over deploy, over subscribe, or overly deploy tools that are redundant to one another, in addition to deploy tools that are certainly powerful with care and feeding, but they're not set and forget tools. And a lot of tools out there are marketing and selling as they should and as they are, but they are maybe mismarketing themselves, saying all you need is us, we're turnkey, just
Hmm.
deploy and run away. And I'd love to tell everybody that's listening that that is a realistic possibility for today's threat landscape. But unfortunately, it's not. And so when you look at deploying the right tools, there's got to be the right team to manage it. And manage it means everything from configure it to monitor it to respond to it if that tool trips or tells you something is afoot in the network, right? And so, but again, I think layering tools is important, but layering the right people with the right tools is not important. It's mandatory today, simply because again, we've seen really, really good tools when it's just the tool versus the internet for a week and nobody's watching it, nobody's looking at it, nobody's monitoring it. Tools are still tools. And so, yeah, I would say layering is certainly more important. And vendor diversity is another really big component that we leverage at Blockworks. And so, for those that aren't familiar, it's a simple concept. You just don't put all your eggs in one vendor's basket. And so, if a vendor is there offering you, you can get a firewall for this month, you can get endpoint for this month, you can get email for this month, but all of it can be $5.99 a month, right? Like some crazy, you know, Brand Smart USA deal. Just be wary of the reality that everybody's the best at something and nobody's the best at everything. And so when you look at firewall and we leverage Palo, you look at endpoint and we leverage Deep Instinct, and you look at email and we leverage Avanon, it's there's a reason why we don't leverage everything Checkpoint offers. There's a reason why we don't leverage everything Palo offers, right? And again, and so we've had to curate this stack to be both diverse and surgical to the function we need it to meet. We don't need an endpoint security tool that is also a VPN, that is also a SASE, that is also a content filter, that is also right. And I think that's the dilemma that most of us are finding ourselves in when we go shopping in the channel today. Is people are jamming features in that are either bolted on after the fact, they're not optimized, they're just not great. And I really think, it may be crass to say, but it's just mediocre. There's no like bleeding edge, really good at this specific thing tool. It's harder to find those kind of tools. It's harder to find vendors that want to create those tools because they have candidly boardrooms that are saying make more so we can sell more. Like
Yeah.
develop more, not just make more, but develop more so we can sell more and own more market share. So I get it from a boardroom down perspective, but the kinetic effect in the trenches as a cyber analyst and an operator is there's a lot of mediocre out there right now. And it's not mediocre intentionally. I want to be really clear. They're not mediocre vendors. They're not mediocre people developing them. The end product that is ultimately lands in the end user's lap, that is installed in their machine, and it's just, it doesn't run with their best interest in mind. Often I see it. And so, layering's important. Got a can of worms there, but I think layering teams on top of tools, on top of some diversity, is really the key ingredients there.
Yeah, that was great. And, it's something that we've talked about previously, I believe, last October. Now that we're coming back up on
It's
October, we had
crazy.
a Frankenstein stack
Right.
episode. And the name was hilarious, but it is so true. And that's exactly what you just described. It's just throwing everything in there and not really digging deep into what you're getting. So, one thing that I like to do is I like to think of it like a castle, right? You have walls, moats, guards, and watchtowers. One defense might fail, but multiple layers drastically reduce the odds of a breach, right?
Right.
If one fails, it could stop it at the other. Or it can also give you more time to stop or to prevent the breach from moving further. So, with that, can you break down what some common mistakes MSPs may make when building their stack? Something that we see often.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I jumped the gun on this question, not even realizing it, but I think, the common mistake being is that you can buy your way to a point of cyber readiness, that you can purchase readiness as a product. And I would just be weary of that. It is as much a thing you buy as much as a worldview you kind of put on your own psyche and how you do business and how you manage networks, right? Like anybody out there that's a software developer knows how to make things work, right? They know how to go through the development cycle and here's the end result and here's the requirements and here's what I got to build. Few know how to make it work securely. And I think that's the mindset shift is yes, users need to work, but the users need to also make sure that they're secured. And some would lean on the opposite side is like I lock down the machine, I lock down every application and they can't run anything. I don't tell them to. And that is certainly strong in the resilience sense. But who's paying the price for maybe the tipping of the scale too far to the left? And that's the user. That's the user and their productivity. And so, or morale, right? Like, I don't know how most users respond to those things. And so, it's a balance. But I would say most common mistakes, specifically MSPs are making, are um, candidly just absorbing too much responsibility or too much from a sake of management perspective when they ought to or they should be maybe better stewarding their time, going out and selling, going out and marketing, getting in front of people, knocking on doors, getting on webinars, putting content on LinkedIn, right? Whatever it is to put their business in front of their customers. Instead of that, they're configuring tools because they don't want to pay whatever X% more for management. But ultimately, it's a question of not what's it's scalable and sustainable are really the two key metrics. And so if you're looking at your stack, if you're looking at how many tools you have, most often when we come into contact with somebody that never heard us before, heard of Blockworks before, we have the ability to go through and evaluate their entire stack. And most often, their tool or their vendor count is reduced by 40 or 50%. It's pretty remarkable. And so, why that's important is you get better margin, you get better capability as well as sustainability to the simple precept that needs to be managed, it needs to be monitored, and I, as a business owner or a 5-man shop or a 12-man shop, can't sit in front of a screen all day and watch this. And I can't maybe pay somebody, you know, however much to sit here and watch this. And so, yeah, I think ultimately there's a lot of things that could be included in the cost and rolled up, but I also think that educating from an MSP standpoint, education is your best friend,
Yeah.
rather than lead with maybe fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but educate users on risk, educate them on what you do about risk, communicate it in their terms. And I think more would be receptive than most MSPs think.
Yeah, I think another thing that I believe is one of the biggest mistakes is overloading on detection only tools. It's great for alerts, but it's not great at preventing anything. Detection only tools, in my mind, should not ever be used for someone who doesn't have a SOC behind them. The detection only tool is a tool for a SOC. It is not a security solution, right? It's not going to stop anything. That's like calling a camera a lock. So, completely
It's a
two
really good
different things.
example. Yeah.
Yeah. I think another big thing is buying without a plan, right? They're adopting tools without mapping them to actual threats and business needs, kind of like what you were saying, Mike. And last but not least, I think it's cohesiveness, right? Another item most don't pay attention to is that cohesiveness of their services together. So, with that, how can you ensure that tools in your stack work together without creating gaps or overlaps? Because we've seen multiple times where they're wanting to, roll out our endpoint security solution while keeping their old solution. And
Yeah.
obviously those are gonna butt heads. They're gonna either flag each other or it just doesn't work. So how do you prevent that and how do you dig deeper into that?
Yeah. One thing we've done often with people that are just merely curious, and I say that as a really safe, you know, entry point to, you don't have to subscribe to us to hop onto a call with us and vice versa. But I would say if you hop on a discovery call, and we've often had it where prospects have handed us a list. Hey, here's everything I'm running right now. What's your take? Right. And what's redundant? What's effective? What am I maybe oversubscribed to? And just get a second opinion, honestly. And I think, again, we're very quick to say, hey, here's what we do and here's what we don't do. Obviously, it's difficult to find, and this is why we're kind of the black sheep in the space. Is it's very difficult to go to a vendor or a partner rather, and present that list without being fear of being sold everything, right? Like all you need is us, right? And so I think, if we've had prospects come to us with, hey, this is what I do for backups, this is what I do for user awareness training, here's what I do for this, here's what I do for that. And I mean, I've personally made Excel spreadsheets that map it out and say, hey, here's where we could remove 2 to 3 tools, deploy one. Here's where we could reduce cost and optimize spend. Here's where we can, and again, some prospects come in and come on board, and some prospects come in and they're just merely educated as far as where we are and where we fit. So I would say, you know, how do you ensure if you're an MSP or an IT team, how do you ensure that the tools in your stack are working together? Candidly, reach out to us. I would say schedule a discovery call. Hit us at hello ad or info ad or sales ad, and any one of those will land in somebody's lap that we can address. But I would say, we do this all the time. We know virtually every tool in the industry from a endpoint, cloud, firewall, and assessment perspective. And so, again, it's something that we encourage prospects to reach out to us to and simply get an idea of. That's what the point of the discovery call. Right? Discovery call is not, and there's no commitment following a discovery call. And so, yeah. Besides that, you have frameworks. We have the 21 blocks. If you go to blockworks.com/21 blocks, that's 21 BLOKS. at the end of our website. We have a roadmap document. It's a framework built around preemptive security that, kind of illustrates, what are some controls, and that makes it really measurable to say, hey, I have this already. Hey, I don't have this already. Like I have user awareness training. I have acceptable use policy. I have DNS and NTP security controls, or at least locked down and hardened. So, I would say if you're curious, reach out to us, get a discovery call. If you're wanting more of a introverted self-service exercise, I would say, go to blockworks.com. There it is, 21 blocks, /21 blocks. And there is a roadmap framework there that a lot of people use, and it's helpful.
Yeah, that was a perfect answer, and I love that, you had examples of how we've actually done that, and like you said, it's not like we're trying to say use us for every single thing. Like you said, sometimes what you already have does work and does cohesively work with the tools or services that we have. So, Matt, anything from you on that question? You've been a silent Matt today.
Nope, I don't
Working,
have anything.
alrighty. Another topic of discussion is visibility and reporting. This is a big one. It's not just a nice thing to have, right? It's not just a pretty thing to bring up. It can be used to break down and really show what kind of return on investment you're getting, especially when it becomes prevention centric cybersecurity. It's kind of harder to prove that ROI, right? So what role does the visibility and reporting play in the value of a stack?
Reporting is incredibly important, and that's like a universal platitude. The reason it's important is because it tells the story to non-technical folks who often have to foot the bill for these controls. And so reporting is specifically built so that, at least by us, specifically built so that there's a technical team that we interact with and we work with really often. And they know the value of what we do because they're often interacting with us and hearing from the SOC and etc. There is a degree of separation from the technical team and the C-suite or the head office or the ownership and the stakeholder, who are often signing the monthly invoices for costs going to keep the business safe, but they're not getting feedback or proof of value, or again, there's reports that talk about this ROI story. And so, visibility is important to the SOC. I think that's a more technical control. The reporting piece it's certainly important, but it's more than just pie graphs and pretty pictures. I think it's ultimately an assurance that I am getting what I'm paying for, and it ought to be required for that reason. And so that's why we put a ton of effort, where we even have one specific vendor in our stack that attempted to create reporting, and it wasn't great. Candidly speaking, it wasn't great. And again, they're great at what they're great at, and they abandoned development on the reporting because it just wasn't something they were excelling at. And so what did we do? We went ahead and built reporting with the metrics coming out of that platform for the exact reason that we believed it wasn't just nice to have, it was a requirement to inform whoever's opening their wallet and paying for that service every month. Because again, it's almost like insurance, right? Like you don't ever want to pay for something because you have to, and you hope
Yeah.
that you never have to use. You would love to be paying for something that you're actively using, actively gleaning value from, and that is a feel good purchase, right? Like I bought this thing, I use this thing, I'm glad I bought this thing, right? Like if you're a family with one car, which we were for a long time, bought a second car, now I'm able to get around. I got a second car, my wife has the car, right? Like it's just there's an easy proof of value story there. In cybersecurity, it's much more difficult. And so that's why the reporting has to be very intentionally crafted so that, again, there's our SOC and all of the cyber operators that are keeping environments safe 24/7, 365. There's then the technical contacts of the partners that we partner with who are receiving the alerts and seeing the actions we take. The whole degree of separation from them and the people signing the check for such services, for such management. And so that reporting is really leapfrogging. It ought to land in their office so that they see the value. And again, whatever your organization looks like, if you're an MSP and an MID, that report is for your client. Your client is not technical. They're not getting SOC alerts. They're not responding to alerts, nor should they. They should just be saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Business Owner, you're investing this much a month in this. Here's a report on what we've saw, what we've picked up on, what we've prevented, what we stopped over the course of the past 30 days. So that there's a two-part feeling that comes from this. One, glad I'm subscribing to this.
Mm-hmm.
And then a concern, what happens if I unsubscribe from this? And so, again, reporting standard ought to be standard, but it has to tell a story. It can't just have endless lines and scrolls of pie graphs, right? People see through that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I liked your analogy, and I had one pop into my mind as well, is that everyone hates paying for medical insurance, but every single time, without fail, every single time I go to the doctor and I see the bill, I'm always, oh, thank
Man,
God
I'm
I
glad I
have,
paid for that.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm so glad I have that
yeah,
insurance. So it's,
100%.
it just, it's its own proof of value. Good reporting turns security from a black hole of spending into a measurable, result-driven operation, so to
Yep.
speak. Well, to close us off for today, if you could only pick three tools to defend an organization, which would they be and why? And I know that's a good one. So,
This is gonna be a rough soundbite, so don't pull this one. Yeah, the opportunity cost. It's funny when you go do your graduate work. It's you get used to in college writing really really long papers, and then you get to a point where it's like, all right, say a lot in 100 words, right? That's the harder
those,
part of that spectrum, and that's where we're at right now. So okay, so three tools. Um, I would assume management of these tools because that's a vector of that could make this differ very much. I mean, what we leverage right now is Deep Instinct for our endpoint, which we provide. um Palo Alto Networks for our firewall, our next gen firewall, network security, remote access. And then Checkpoint's Avanon suite, now they're Harmony suite or whatever they've renamed it as. So I would say if you had to secure a network, you partner with us for endpoint, firewall, and email. And it covers a lot of sins. And I think, for those that are often in a place where they have to pick two out of those three, endpoint and email are a really complementary pair where users can travel, users can go out of the office, work from home, in the office, and it follows them in a really elegant way. And so, yeah, I mean, man, there's so much more. There's awareness training, there's vulnerability assessments, there's backups, there's hardening, there's you know documentation libraries. So yeah,
there's a lot
it's
to
tough.
choose from. Yeah,
There's a lot to choose from. It's that food court again. But I would say, if three tools or three vectors, I would say you get really, really confident about your network and the visibility therein. Get really, really confident about email being scanned before it's delivered to the mailbox, not after, like Microsoft does it right now. And really, really good, robust endpoint security that does not add to add a user productivity hit or a user compute hit, meaning their computer slowed down.
yeah. And to speak a little bit to your comment of individuals or companies who only have space for two or budget for two, right? If you're found in that position and you only have the budget for endpoint and email, like Mike stated, I would look into adding some of those smaller items that aren't just, it's not like a subscription, it's not something that you pay all throughout the year. Something like random end user awareness training. We bring this up a lot. You can have the best security in the world, but your end user is your biggest vulnerability, right? Because if they're not trained and if they don't know what not to click or what not to open or download, it doesn't matter what kind of security you have. If there's a way, there's a will, right? Or if there's a will, there's a way, right? Another thing is vulnerability assessments, right? A lot of the time, those are one-time payments or one-time purchases. You can get that once a year. And just make sure that once you do get those vulnerability assessments, you actually follow out or try to figure out how to fix any of the items that are pointed out in those reports. That's something that a lot of individuals do in the cybersecurity world is they will get a vulnerability assessment or penetration test before they even get a vulnerability assessment, not ready for that next step. and then just do nothing with it because they don't know how to do those next steps. They see all these red tags explaining all the vulnerabilities that they have, and they think they're done. That is just a step in the process to then fix the issues that are pointed out. So, at the end of the day, a cybersecurity stack isn't about how many tools you can cram in, it's about how well they work together to stop threats before they strike. Well, that's all the time we have for today's safety brief. If you have any questions or want to learn more about building a prevention first stack, reach out to us at info@blockworks.com. And don't forget to follow for more conversations that cut through the noise and focus on what actually keeps you secure in cybersecurity. Plus, we do have an upcoming webinar diving deep into our cloud security service on September 24th that you won't want to miss. The registration link can be found in the comments if you are live or in the description if you're catching the podcast version of today's episode. We hope to see you there. Stay safe and stay proactive.